IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today for a second time, we have Devangana Mishra. And we're talking about autism. It's something that I have no idea about. So I'm so excited to be having this discussion with her. Now, this is part 2. So in case you missed part 1, please go and listen to that before listening to this. When I'm listening to you, I can imagine parents being freaked out by, their child's behavior like this.
Yeah.
And you've obviously had lots of experience with children. Parents would not have. How do parents, or what advice would you give parents, or steps that you would give parents to change their way of behaving with their children who have autism? Or what would that approach be like? Like, how would they handle the temper tantrums? How would they handle these things?
I'll be super honest with you. I don't engage with parents at all in this capacity because, you can't ever change a parent's instinctive parenting style. And I think a lot of people try to do that. They try to change how, my mom is very strict. So if I were to sit here wearing something which is very revealing, my mom would be like, "No, tappa marungi," with my mom and dad's house, right? And my dad's be whoever, do whatever. So I come from a very traditional family where my father pushes boundaries in the world, is open to everything. And my mom is no, be a good girl from a good family. And she's very strict, right? And if anyone ever told my parents to change, I wouldn't know my parents anymore. The same way, I'm sure your parents are the same way, right? You have different kinds. So I don't tell parents, if a parent beats up a child, I'm too bad. The child will come and complain. I'll be okay, what can you say? Let's find your voice, whatever, John, let's say if the next time your mom beats you up, here are a few ideas of what you could say. This is what my brother used to do. He would run around and hide under tables or dodge back a shoe at my mom. So I'm just I teach them how to handle their parents, but I don't interfere.
Yeah, because technically parents are also part of the real life, right? And that is also something that you have to overcome. That's also an obstacle in itself.
Totally. Yeah. It's a great problem solving skill, no? If you learn how to handle your parents, you know how to handle the world.
And as it is, when we learn psychology, you said everything starts from our parents only. So might as well learn how to deal with them first.
Totally.
Yeah. And when we deal with stress, you're so right. I keep telling people that stress is all an external thing. It's only your reaction to it that makes it stress or not. So if you can
100%.
make it stress, not make it stress.
Yeah, totally.
If a person who, I obviously don't have kids, I don't have kids on the autism spectrum. If I meet somebody who's on the autism spectrum, what is how should I understand it? How should I work with the person? How should I, interact with the person? Are there rules? Are there tips? Anything to keep in mind?
Yeah. So, again, I can't change the way everybody acts, but how I would or you would is almost imagine you have gone to France and you meet somebody who's totally French, or you go to Italy who somebody who's totally Italian. Either you remain totally Indian and be main to yahi khaunga, main yahi karunga, you speak in your English. Or maybe you'd learn some Italian and speak to them in a little bit of Italian, or you'd be parlez-vous français or whatever else, right? So I've lived in so many countries and spoken so many languages. Sometimes I'm just you have to maintain a little bit of yourself, but also be a little bit like that person and what that person writes. If there's there's a child, he's not making eye contact and he just wants to talk about trains, then be okay, tell me about your trains. What people sometimes do is they're make eye contact with me. Why aren't you looking at me? Why aren't you talking to me? And I'm just just whatever they're interested in, tell them that. And then you pull them into what you are interested in is what I tell people. And sometimes I pretend they're interested, and that's also okay. It's dude, if you go on a date, I'm sure there are girls who speak a lot of rubbish. And sometimes as a guy, you're just yeah, sure. That's what I do sometimes with kids.
Smile and wave.
But I'm sure on podcasts there are enough people who bore you.
Because it's
And
so
yeah,
interesting, right? It's almost like a life skill in itself. You be you,
ah,
right? You
but
learn to accept the person the way that person is. And instead of saying that, why
yeah,
you not like this? Why you not like me? Why you
yeah,
not changing?
yeah,
Right? You have to
totally,
conform to what
totally,
society is saying in that way. I think there are a lot of
totally,
those elements that are coming in it.
totally, totally.
Can you share some more stories of successes and things like
Yeah,
that?
I
I
can. I
would
can tell
love to
you.
hear a lot more.
Can I tell you one amazing story? This is
Mm.
this is gonna blow your mind. So I had a kid. I can take his name because he's like publicly announced he's on the spectrum of autism. Thomas. When I met him, Ashton, he was in ninth grade, so he was 14. He had very intelligent, like high on the spectrum of autism, played the piano, very intelligent kid. But what was happening was he was rebelling against everything. So he'd be in a class and he'd throw away his computer, he'd throw away things. Like he'd just like always be very, very violent and destructive. If anyone spoke about anything, he'd like suddenly get up and say, "Kill Trump. Trump should be murdered." So like teachers were just like, "Go out of the class. What's going on?" Right? And I went in. So my job was to kind of like help launch this high school of sorts. So I went and I saw his behavior. I'm like, he's onto something. And I was like, so over lunch one day, he was sitting alone, eating his angry food angrily and like repeating the same things, like kill Trump, Trump be dead, like all of these things. I'm like, what is going on? So I'm like, Thomas, tell me what's going on. He's like, I'm very intelligent. So he's a Chinese kid. He's like, I know all the world's secrets and they're all in my computer. So Trump has actually completely like taken over my computer and he's taking away my intelligence. So whenever I'm trying to write something intelligent and what is that Trump is coming to steal it away. So I'm like, okay, like that's totally understandable. It's possible. So I was like, okay, why don't you come into my class? And I work with like some milder kids on the spectrum of autism who were gentler, right? And they were like, no, Thomas comes, like he'll disrupt us all. So I'm like, be quiet, we'll bring him in. And I started to teach courses about American history, about the history of surveillance, about America and China and how they're two superpowers fighting for power. So all of these things we tried to teach. And actually what that did was, for the first time, Thomas, who was seen as a violent, destructive, mad child, was just like pulled out into logic. And he was just like trying to like see things logically rather than exactly what you said, right? Like instead of reacting, he started to like look at the world logically, understand Russia, understand China, understand America, understand why surveillance even came into being. I told him about Julian Assange and how, he pulled out the WikiLeaks incident. So we studied a lot about all of this. And the class started to like go to him for like cheat codes. Like, Acha Thomas, how should we do this? How should we do that? And he was a tiny little Chinese kid and he like stopped the class, explained some concept which I couldn't understand. And at the end of the semester, we all had to write an essay on 10 reasons why Trump could be a really good president. And like, Thomas didn't have a sense of humor, but he just laughed and laughed. And he was like, "Miss Devangana, you can't do this to us." I'm like, come on, try. And then he wrote the funniest essay. So now that boy had a sense of humor. So it was all just like a very interesting way of zooming him out into laughing at his own madness and like all of these things.
This reminds me of the podcast I actually wrote this morning, which is about listening. And I was saying that
Yeah.
every time we hear something or somebody talking, we just want to react to what they're saying, but we never actually listen to what they're saying. And
Totally.
across the board, across the examples that you've given, it was actually you just listening and saying, okay, tell me more.
It is so fascinating, right? Like I'm so fascinated by people in the world because I'm a school teacher. That's all I do. Like I'm fascinated by everything. So, and that's what adults are also like, they'll come up with big ideas and all of that. And nothing scares me. I'm just like, okay. Okay.
And I think that's the thing,
Yeah.
right? Tell me, where did you come up with this theory on Trump needs to die? Like, you're engaged in
Yeah.
that conversation as opposed to how can you say
Right.
such things? You cannot say such
Yeah.
things. Why are you shouting? Why are you
No,
angry?
no. There's no right and wrong in the world, right? Like what's right, what's wrong. So I'm just like open to every conspiracy, every diet funda, everything that people come up with. I'm like, sure, go for it. Yeah.
And the two other learnings that I took out from this is one, I think it's a patient process. You have to be really patient with this. You can't necessarily see changes overnight taking place.
Yeah.
Wait, like you said, it took a whole semester for this change to take place.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing also parents, don't necessarily have that patience through it. They want like, I want to get back to my work. Why is this taking so long? And
Yeah, totally.
I think the reason why a professional like you is needed is because of that patience and bringing that
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
being. And the second thing is that I learned was, I think the kids find their way, right? You are just highlighting different areas and they are ultimately finding their way through this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's it. So I'm just like I'm a facilitator of whatever journeys they want to take. Like anything that they want to do, I'm gonna go do it. I'm the facilitator. I don't judge you. Go become anything. Yeah.
You've done this across countries. What
I
is the
have. So I
difference
started off
between the different countries?
I think India has been the hardest, to be honest, and also New York. I'll tell you why, because I feel like we're very like West. Like New York was very, very capitalistic, westernized, lots of racial politics, all of that. So to be patient in a very fast country can sometimes be hard. Indonesia, I worked at this beautiful, very rich school called the Jakarta International School. It was very easy there because parents were like, "You are my kid. Now take your time." So I could just like nurture and do whatever. Plus, Indonesians in general, their culture is so laid back and musical and slow. So there was a rush. I'm just like chill, like life chill. In Hong Kong, while China is so fast paced, the school that I worked in was basically like the one that I helped start the high school off was for kids who didn't fit into any other system or school. So parents had given up, they can't be in China's rat race. So basically they were put into this school. Then now you guys take care of whatever they're going to do. So that is interesting. But India, Ashton, to be honest, is so woke. It is so like caste politics, political politics, racial politics, which is all needed. But I feel like that sometimes makes parents very anxious because parents, middle class, lower middle class parents are very ambitious, as are, high society people. And I think in that India is like developing energy, kids bear the brunt of it because I'm just like, dude, your child, if he learns to go out and hang out with friends, it's good enough.
Yeah.
So they're like, ये डॉक्टर बनेगा, इसको साइंटिस्ट बना दो, इसको फैक्ट्री में डब्बे फोल्ड कराना अभी सिखाओ, पेंटर बनाओ. I'm just like, let him sit and talk.
But parents
So
have
India
that
is
ambition
very
that a
hard.
child who's autistic should go and work and should go and do this and should go and do that.
They want life skills constantly. And I'm like, what is life skill? Like, what is life skill? The life skill is you wake up, you eat your breakfast, you go to a job that pays enough to live in a little house, you meet someone you like, you date them, and you die. Like, you have 3, 4 friends. What else is a life skill? So I feel like people don't get that and they get very like big and anxious and ambitious. And kids on the spectrum of autism, because their brains are so wired ambitiously, they also like are like, this is not enough, nothing is enough. So they're angry or they're depressed. So
So there is
India
an
is
element of that ambition latent in most autistic kids.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On this round is on me. Gauri meets Meenu Margaret, founder and CEO of Bliss Club. They talk about how Meenu began to produce pocket-enriched activewear for women. On Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna explain how one can prepare their kids for emergencies. This week on the Musafir story, Saif and Faiza speak with Akshita Bhanjdeo, director of Belgaria Palace, an 18th century Victorian-era style palace that is now a boutique hotel in Mayurbhanj, Odisha. And on Audio Gyan, Kedar speaks to Kshitiz Anand about his Happy Horizons Trust and his community-based learning. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you might be listening to us on. And do check us out on YouTube. We're building a whole bunch of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And we're also doing a small listener survey, which we would really appreciate your help with. It helps us kind of talk to advertisers. So you could go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It'll just take a couple of minutes and it would be really helpful to us. We do appreciate this. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance and the India Water Portal. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. All right, let's jump into the conversation. So like, for example, for me, life skills would be things like learning how to share, learning how to make friends, learning how to, for example, be creative, do your own research. Like those are things that are life skills. Like I don't mean life skills like how to brush your teeth. That's not what I mean by life skills. But can you teach children these things? Can you teach autistic children how to make friends, how to share, how to do those aspects?
I can't teach them anything, but like I would like what I do is I pull in a kid when I'm hanging out with 3, 4 kids and we have a really good time. We have a really big laugh. And then this child is like, oh, maybe even I should try or make an attempt. Or they're just like, I'm not interested in all this. I don't want to be social. So it's almost like I can do it and be like, if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't, then you don't. Yeah.
So it's up to the child to pick it up whether the child wants to or not.
That's right. Even things like sharing, it's almost like I can model sharing, but I'm like, if you want to share, you share. If you don't, you don't.
So like you would have a kid who is not on the autistic spectrum. Like a parent can force them into teaching how to share or teaching how to make friends and stuff like that. That is not possible with autistic kids.
It is, but sometimes it's very fractured, to be honest. Like, I'm sure like you right now, since, you're like this famous Ashdin Doctor, I'm sure like you have a lot of people who like just reach out to you who think they're your friends, but maybe they're not your friends, right? So it's almost like this, like you can't teach friendship. Either you want to be friends with someone or you don't. So like I had 2 boys, Miles and William, as different as each other as they can be. Miles hated William, William hated Miles, very competitive, but they were friends. And I'm just like, okay, sure. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you would want our listeners to know about autism that we haven't covered? Anything that you would think about? Like, for example, I had this one idea on habits for autism. Like the way that I look at habits are things that you do every day, either thoughts or actions that ultimately define or create your life, right? Because those are things that happen on an everyday basis, and hence there is consistency. I'm guessing certain autistic kids on a spectrum would be extremely habitual to certain behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is that aspect of compulsively going through something over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you tweak or change habits for them? Or are there habits that every autistic child should start working on? Is there anything like that you have in mind?
So when they're young, sometimes like what I do is I try to put them on a schedule, on a structure. Many kids abide by like exactly that, like they're structured in their schedule, morning, wake up at this time, work out, blah, 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 right? Almost like a third-year doctor in training schedule, right? Like they love that rigor. And there are some kids who hate that structure, right? The moment they read numbers, like 3 rules to this, 5 rules to this, they like want to tear the paper and throw it away. So like the moment I'm like, write 10 things, they will write 50 things and then throw it back at me like I don't care about it. So you see all kinds, and then I'll make fun of them, and then they'll be like, okay, like, give it back to me. I don't want to throw it, right? So it's all a back and forth. I teach them how to live by a structure, but then, like, it's for them to decide. It's almost like working out. Like, you and I work out every day, probably, or like 5 times a week. And there are some people who just have never worked out, and they're super happy. They're just chill, living their lives as they are, right? So I'm just like, sure. There are people who meditate. And there are people like, I'm never going to meditate. I'm just going to like live this life of eating junk food and fries. So,
fair.
Yeah.
So you get...
Like what my thought is, like, you will probably get it. Autism is so much like just the people that we meet in life. If we let these kids free into the real world, what we do is we just cage them so early on that they can't blossom into the real personalities. We say specialness, so special school mein dalo, special class mein dalo, special season karo. And I'm just like, what if we don't? Show them, like let them be in a regular class, let them fight with kids, let them put a compass in someone's bag, get into jail for a few days, let them get in trouble. So
that sounds very vicious, huh? Devangana?
Dude, like kids have bitten me, kids have hit me, kids have like sent me porno on my phone, like they've just done all kinds of things, and I've just had like I've laughed about it because I'm just like, this is a kid. What do you do? I'm their teacher.
Right. It's patience. I think the key word is patience in that. I think not trying to expect them to fit into a particular mold that we already have for what people in society are supposed to do and behave like, and then be patient with them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's it.
Lovely. This was fantastic. I'm so happy that I had this conversation with you. It was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. Can I tell you one last thing?
Oh, tell.
Interest, right? One last thing. But like I was looking at, so I know someone who's really good friends with a stand-up comedian who all of her everything is based on her, usually based on her parents, right? Like pulling her mom's cheeks, doing this, doing that, all her reels, everything was about that. Now, if you're living 80% of your life doing this with your parents, sometimes like the anxiety in parents and the child would come like when you're off screen. Do I really love my parents, or is this like something that I'm doing for a screen? Do I really like feel like this about them, or am I doing this for the screen, right? And I know that this person, this comedian, got like very angry with everybody then because like I think what was so natural for her almost became removed. And that made her very anxious because she was just like, is this naturally how I feel about my parents? Or was I doing it? And did the people do it to me? And she started like fighting with cab drivers and like truck drivers and people who were her managers and everything. And this is exactly what happens to kids with autism. They naturally like to play with trains, with Lego, and then we turn it into a business. And then they're like, do I naturally like this? Or has now someone, put a spotlight on it so I have to pretend to like it, and then they hate it and they throw it away, and then they're like, I'll do something else. So yeah.
Interesting. So how would you handle something like that? When don't spotlight it, but then you're trying to create that in that person, right? Like, or make them good at something.
I'm just like it's okay, it's good. And like totally like ignore it as a child. And then if they make money out of it, someone notices it, then well and good. And if no one does, then I'm like, too bad, work harder.
So we never create like goals for them, or we don't create like business plans for them, or we don't create those kinds of things at all.
I do. Like exactly how you would and I would create for our own lives. Like I do it for them. And some kids like fill their brain with that I'm going to work towards it. And some kids are like I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to do something totally else. So
I remember working with a child.
Very like non-consummate.
Now that you're talking about it, I remember working with a child on this, and there were two things that struck out. One was when I created a schedule for him, he followed it like a machine. Like I was like, wow, this is like the best coachee I've ever had. Like a machine. In other aspects of life, completely non-functional. But this morning routine, you couldn't, with a hammer, you couldn't change it. Right?
Totally.
That was one very interesting aspect of it. And the second was that there was one day when he was feeling particularly hopeless. Like I just want like all of this to like end and all of that. And I was having a conversation with him, and I said this one line, which was like, we're just working on getting 1% better every day. And then he took that as a goal and one mission for his life and just ran with it.
Totally.
It was like imprinted on his brain, saying, this is what I'm doing. 1% better every day after 1% better every day after. And such a difference happened in 1 month, just when this one tiny goal was set. Fascinating.
Yeah. It is really fascinating. Yeah.
Devangana, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing this with us. And
thank you for getting me.
How can people continue this conversation with you? Where can they reach out to you?
Like reaching out, like honestly, I'm a school teacher, so it's almost like imagine as in like your 8th grade English teacher. Suddenly, like people start writing to her, she'll be excited, and I'm like that. Like if anyone writes to me from any part of the world asking about it, I'm like, yes, sure, like I'll chat with you. So I'm a school teacher with like zero judgments with kids. I have zero judgments with adults either. So anyone can reach out to me.
I love that energy. But tell me, where can they reach out? What platforms are you on?
My email or like I just actually my Instagram was private, but I made it public. So like on my Instagram, on my email, those are the two best ways.
Perfect. Can you just spell out your Instagram ID and your email address?
My Instagram ID is Devangana_M and my email is devangana.mishra@gmail.com. And my website is Brain Bristle, so if anyone wants to go to that. Yeah.
Brain Bristle.
You're awesome. Yeah, Brain Bristle.
Thank you. I'm so happy that we did this.
This is really fun. Yeah.
Now, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am at Ashdin Doctor on Twitter and Instagram. We have a brand new habit coaching online course. quizzes, videos, and a lot more on the website awesome180.com. So check it out now.
We face 100 dilemmas every day while raising our children and nurturing our families. Why not let science help us make informed decisions to solve our dilemmas? Hi, I'm Devi Shobha.
And I'm Meghna. We host Big Talk About Tiny Humans, where we will help you unpack challenges around parenting and your child's development.
And more importantly, we will equip you with research-backed strategies that you can readily act on.
Tune in to our podcast every Wednesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or your favorite podcast platforms.
Working Monday to Friday glued to your chair making you feel dull? Worry not. Get your 5-minute weekly dose of travel around the world with postcards from nowhere. Join me every Thursday as I explore the strange, obscure, and fascinating parts of the world and bring out facets of travel you may not have thought of before. You can find us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.